How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Swanee, and for today's video, I'm testing out the new Masters of Ceremony Warbond that just released for Helldivers 2. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys right here at the beginning. This was my least favorite Warbond out of all the ones that have been added so far to Helldivers 2. In fact, I had so little fun testing out all these new items that normally I try to get these testing videos out as quickly as possible to, for the algorithm's sake on YouTube. But I had so little motivation to actually sit down and record and edit this video that I went and took a 3-hour nap before I started working on it. Because these items, they're just not that fun or exciting. But we're going to go over everything, and I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions on each of these new items. So I'm going to do things in today's video a little bit differently. I'm going to start with the things that I liked the most first, and then work my way down the list. Starting with the G142 Pyrotech grenade. It says that this is a repurposed firework that showers its immediate surrounding area and sparks before exploding, as delightful as it is incendiary. It says it has a damage of 50, penetration of 3, outer radius of 5, and then it is incendiary and explosive. Now on paper, these stats look awful. It looks like it's one of the worst grenades in the game. It just doesn't look all that appealing. But one of the redeeming features of this grenade is that they give you 6 of them. I don't know why they don't list how many you can carry here in the stats. That would definitely be really useful. But you can carry 6 of these grenades, and then if you use the armor passive that gives you 2 additional grenades, then you can carry a total of 8. And having 8 grenades is just really good. And every time you pick up an ammo crate, either from a resupply or a supply backpack, that's going to refill 3 of your grenades. So I was using both the engineering kit armor passive to give me 8 grenades, and I was using the supply backpack, so I was just spamming grenades left and right, and it was actually pretty fun. So not only do you get a lot of these grenades, but these grenades are really strong due to the recent changes that they just made to fire damage. Fire damage is really good now. Now, I've not had the chance to sit down and do all the numbers and do all the individual testing for fire against all 3 factions yet, just because there's so much new content that I've got to test out all the weapons and stuff still. But from what I can tell, if something gets caught on fire now, it is going to get absolutely massacred by that fire tick damage. And the cool thing about these grenades is that when you throw them at an enemy, they will spin in a circle and catch anything in its radius on fire, which can be extremely useful if you're throwing them straight on top of a bug breach or an Illuminate ship drop or an Automaton drop ship dropping off reinforcements. If you can find a large group of enemies, these grenades are going to absolutely wreck that large group. I was getting some pretty high kill streaks, upwards of 30, pretty consistently anytime I stumbled across some enemy reinforcements. Now, I was having some success with all 3 factions using this grenade. When I was facing the Automatons, it does a great job of anything that's like a small enemy type or medium, like the Devastators or Scout Striders. It's going to wreck those guys. But anything bigger like Hulks or tanks or Factory Striders, it's going to struggle against those, obviously. Then when it comes to the Illuminate, it does a great job of taking out the Illuminate. If there's a big horde of Voteless, it's going to just absolutely annihilate all the Voteless. It does a pretty great job of melting through those Overseers as well. So if there's a chunk of 3 or 4 Overseers, it's going to very easily take them all out in just 1 or 2 grenades. It does struggle a little bit against the flesh mobs though, but honestly, everything kind of struggles against the flesh mobs since they're so tanky. But if you can manage to get a flesh mob to stand still for a couple seconds, and then you can just coat them in fire with this grenade, it is going to cook them pretty quickly, especially if you're also popping them with shots while they're baking in the fire. And then obviously when you're facing up against the Terminids, it's probably going to do the best against the Terminids since the bugs hate fire. Anytime you see a bug breach, just throw one of these right on top of the bug breach, and it will just easily wreck that entire bug breach. I was actually having some fun using that armor set that gave me 2 extra grenades, because having 8 fire grenades, it could just create an entire wall of fire. So if you're trying to hold an objective or something, all those enemies are going to have to run through those grenades to get to you. And, they're going to have a hard time doing that. So overall, my thoughts of the G142 Pyrotech grenade is that I was pleasantly surprised. On paper, the stats look pretty bad. But if you're a fan of fire, like if you like to rock an entire fire loadout, maybe you have a flamethrower and some fire grenades, I think you're going to like these. Or if you're doing a mission where you have to close a bunch of bug holes or robot factories, this is a good option to bring since you get so many of them. And overall, the G142 Pyrotech grenades are the highlight of this Warbond for me, and this is the thing that I like the most out of the entire Warbond. Now, my second favorite thing in this Warbond might come as a bit of a surprise to some of you, but I really like the new booster, the sample scanner. This gives Helldivers a 15% chance to retrieve twice the samples on sample pickup. Now, the reason I like this is because, one, this helps out new players or just casual players that don't have all the ship upgrades, and I'm glad that they have a way to catch up to the rest of the player base. And then the second reason that I like this is because this is eventually going to be useful to everybody. At some point, they're going to add new ship upgrades and ways that we can spend our samples. They finally gave us a reason to use our requisition slips with the latest update. Now we can customize our weapons. And once the devs finally give us a reason to spend our samples, then this is going to be useful for everyone. And I'm glad that they gave us this booster sooner rather than later, because this is going to be useful for those new players. The only downside is that if you're a new player, you have to spend your super credits on this crappy Warbond to get this decent booster. But I do think this is a pretty good booster idea. You know, currently it's not helpful for everybody, but for those of you that it is going to help out, I think that's a pretty big W. The next thing on my list that I kind of enjoy about the Warbond is the overall aesthetic. If you don't care about the utility aspect of the Warbond, you don't care how well the weapons perform or anything, and you just want to get this Warbond purely based on cosmetics, then I think this is one of the better Warbonds. I really like the look of these armor sets. There's the light armor, which is the parade commander. It's got that hat on the helmet, and it's just got the red and black. I'm always a sucker for red and black. There's the medium armor set, which is the honorary guard, and it also looks pretty sick. This is probably one of my favorite looking armor sets in the entire game, to be honest. I really love the look of this. And then if we count the heavy armor is what you can get from the Superstore, so it was released alongside the Warbond, so it's not technically in the Warbond, but I'm still going to count it. And it is the bearer of the standard armor set, and I think this looks pretty cool too. I can't really justify spending the super credits on it though if you're kind of tight on super credits, but if you're a big fan of heavy armor, you know, this might be worth getting. Now, I'm not a fan of the fact that they keep splitting up the armors. I don't like the fact that they give you two of them in the Warbond, and then the third one you have to spend additional super credits on. I am not a big fan of them taking an armor set out of the Warbonds and charging additional money just to get the full complete set, but that's a different story. But based solely off of appearance, I am a big fan of the cosmetics from this Warbond. Then up next is the new primary weapon that we got, and it's the R2 Amendment. Now, I've already seen a lot of backlash about this weapon in the community. People are not happy that it's only light armor penetration, and to be honest, I'm not too excited about it either. There are so many heavily armored enemies in this game that once you get to those higher difficulties like Helldive and Super Helldive, light armor penetration weapons just aren't all that powerful. There's just way better options out there. But looking at the weapon, it says it's a semi-automatic ceremonial rifle equipped with a bayonet, can be set to fire in 3-shot bursts to easily conduct a fallen hero salute. Now, what's weird about this weapon is that it can be shot in a 3-round burst, but it only has a capacity of 20. So 20 isn't divisible by 3. So I don't really understand what they were doing there. But looking at the stats, it says it has a damage of 200, a capacity of 20, a recoil of 29, and a fire rate of 480. Now, a lot of people are comparing this weapon to the R63 Diligence, and for good reason. When you compare the two of them, both of them are pretty similar. The Diligence does slightly less damage, but it can hold 5 more shots, and it has better recoil, but it's got a slower fire rate. The difference, though, is that when you go into the customization options for the new amendment, there's only the option to change the optics. There's no attachments whatsoever to this thing, so the recoil and the ergonomics and all that stuff, you're not going to be able to change it very much, which puts it at a pretty big disadvantage when you compare it to the Diligence, because the Diligence has underbarrels and it's got different muzzle attachments, so you can put like a muzzle brake or something on the Diligence. So the recoil is a lot more manageable when you're using the Diligence versus the amendment. Now, the amendment can be kind of fun when you have the 3-round burst mode and you're using it against smaller enemy types, but anything past close to medium range, the recoil is just really hard to manage, and I found myself missing a lot of my shots when compared to the Diligence. The Diligence is just a much more accurate weapon. So if you want a weapon with accuracy and range, then you would want to go with the Diligence over the R2 Amendment. Now, when I there's using the new amendment against the different factions. When you're facing the Automatons, it can be pretty good when you're going up against all those small ones. It'll just one-shot kill a lot of those smaller enemies. So if there's a bunch of them in a group, you can just easily pick them off or stab them with your bayonet. And if you're accurate with your shots, you can pop all of the Devastators in the face and it will kill them. But for anything with thicker armor like the Hulks or tanks or cannons or any of that stuff, it's obviously not going to do anything against those units. Then when facing up against the Illuminate, it's kind of just okay. It's pretty decent at taking out the voteless. In the 3-round burst mode, you can just kind of rapid fire it and take out the voteless. And then if any voteless get up in your face, you can just stab them with the bayonet. So I like that that option is there. But then if you face anything stronger like the Overseers or the Flesh Mobs, it's going to struggle. It basically takes an entire magazine to kill an Overseer if you shoot them in the body. You want to do body shots on them so that it breaks their armor plating, and then you can just shoot them underneath the armor plating. So the ammo economy with this weapon when facing the Illuminate just isn't that good. When you're facing the voteless, you just don't have enough ammo to deal with all the voteless. When you're facing the Overseers, you don't have enough ammo to take out more than a couple. And it's not going to do much against the Flesh Mobs either because they're so tanky. And there's just so many other better options when it comes to primary weapons that can deal with the Flesh Mobs. So when facing up against the Illuminate, I can't really recommend this weapon all that much. And then same deal with the Terminids. It can deal with the smaller Terminids, but since it only has light armor penetration, it's going to struggle with anything big. It's going to struggle with any bile spewers. It can't do anything to bile titans. It sucks against like chargers and impalers. And then it does okay against stalkers and hunters and brood commanders and that kind of stuff. But it's just, you're going to be burning through so much ammo. I can't really recommend it. Same thing with the bayonet. Like if bugs get up in your face, you can kind of, as a last resort, poke them with the bayonet. So I like the option that the bayonet is there as kind of a last resort. But since melee in this game is just not very good, I can't really recommend bringing it solely based off of the bayonet. So I wasn't really all that impressed with the R2 amendment. It's kind of disappointing, to be honest. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. I'd like to see more attachments come to this weapon. Now, I really like the look of this weapon. I think it looks awesome, especially with all the different like paint schemes and stuff you can get. And I do like the fact that we can change the optics on it, but I definitely think it needs something a little extra to make this weapon better. Maybe give us the option to remove the bayonet to make the weapon more accurate. That might help it a little bit. Hopefully it gets some sort of buff in the future. But as it stands right now, I wouldn't recommend getting this Warbond just for this primary weapon. Then up next is the CQC-1 One True Flag. It says the eternal colors of Super Earth can never be tainted, only quenched by the blood of its enemies. It has a call-in time of 4.75 seconds. You can use it unlimited times. And then it has a cooldown time of 480 seconds, which is definitely a choice from the developers. I don't really understand that. Then for the stratagem traits, it's a support weapon. It comes out of a hell pod. I don't know why they include that. It's melee and it's one-handed. And since it's one-handed, it can be paired with things like the directional shield and the ballistic shield. That way you can have a little bit of extra protection if you want to go the melee route. Now, this is a gimmick weapon. There is nothing useful about this weapon. It is pretty much just a copy and paste of the stun lance, which is a secondary weapon. They basically just took a secondary weapon and made it a stratagem. So if you're going to use the flag, you're giving up one of your stratagem slots. So that's like a 500 kg bomb or a hell bomb or a sentry turret or literally anything that's useful, and you're giving that up for a meme weapon. So just keep that in mind if you want to choose this, because this weapon, you know, it doesn't do anything special. It is literally just a melee weapon. I was hoping that once we got to actually test this, it had some sort of secret ability or buff that you could give to your teammates. I thought that would be pretty unique and cool. That way you could play as the support character and you could buff your teammates, but that's not the case. Hopefully the devs listen to feedback and they make that change, because that would be awesome. But all you can do is poke things with it. If you use the peak physique armor that gives you more melee damage, it makes it, you know, kind of usable. You can kind of stun lock some enemies with it. Like you can stun some chargers and they'll kind of stand still so you can poke a charger with it. I ran up and killed a couple impalers with it. Like, you guys know the deal with melee weapons at this point. It's kind of gimmicky. I know some players like the challenge and they like to use these melee weapons. So if you're already a fan of the melee weapons, then this can give you a little bit of variety. This allows you to have a little bit of build variety, so you can bring a melee weapon in your support slot and then change change your secondary weapon to be, I don't know, like the Ultimatum or the Senator or whatever you want your secondary to be, you don't have to give up your secondary for a melee slot. I think that's kind of what they're going for here. But I'm not a big fan of the flag, especially when you have it on your back. It's kind of just waving in the wind, and it can obstruct your view. So when you're trying to aim in third person and shoot your enemies, the flag will kind of get in your way and prevent you from doing so. So that kind of sucks. Now, if you hold down the reload button, you can wave the flag, and you can use it with emotes. So if you use the new emote when you have the flag, you can kind of do the march with the flag, so I guess that's kind of funny. And waving it around is definitely pretty cool. And if you go to drop it, your Helldiver will just plant it into the ground. So, I mean, that's kind of neat. But it would make it even cooler if you planted it in the ground and then it either, like, distracted the enemy or, like I said earlier, give you some sort of buff and give your team some sort of buff when it's planted, but it doesn't do that. So it's literally just here for the memes. If you want to have a fun time with your friends goofing off with the Super Earth flag, then bring it. If you're a fan of melee weapons, then, you know, you might like it. But if you're not a fan of melee weapons, then this is not worth bringing whatsoever. I think it kind of sucks. If they buff it and give you some sort of team support ability where everyone like reloads faster when they're standing by it, or they take less damage when they're standing by it, something to that effect, then I might recommend it in the future. But until then, I don't like the flag. And since we're on the topic of melee weapons, let's talk about the new secondary, the CQC-2 Saber, a one-handed ceremonial sword suitable for use in parades, saberage, and combat. It has a recoil of 6, light armor penetrating, and it's one-handed. Now, this has the same exact stats as the CQC-5 Combat Hatchet, and both this and the Combat Hatchet, in my opinion, are worse than the Stun Baton, because the Stun Baton does the exact same thing, except it will stun lock your enemies. So unless you're a big fan of melee, I don't recommend this. Now, I do think it's cooler than the hatchet because, you know, it's a sword, but unless you're using the peak physique armor and you're a big fan of melee, it's not going to be all that useful. Like bots, Illuminate, bugs, it's kind of the same regardless of the enemy type. With any of the big enemy units on any of the factions, it's basically suicide if you try to kill them with this. It's good at maybe defending yourself in a tight pinch if something gets up in your face, but outside of that, it's just not all that good. I'm not a big fan of melee weapons in Helldivers 2. Hopefully they do something to buff them to make them better in the future, but as it stands right now, melee weapons are pretty much reliant on the peak physique armor, and if you don't bring peak physique, then they're not all that good. They're just kind of there, in my opinion. Like, there's just so many better secondary weapons to bring that are useful when compared to this. Now, it does get some cool points because it's a sword, and a lot of people wanted a sword, and you know, if we're going to have melee weapons, a sword is a cool one to have. Hopefully we get like a lightsaber type weapon that's similar in the future, but until they do something to buff melee weapons, I'm just not a big fan of this new saber. And then lastly, I want to double back and talk about the armor again, because I want to talk about the armor passive and how it is my least favorite thing in this entire Warbond, because it is pretty much useless. And all it does is give the wearer a 50% chance to avoid your limbs from breaking. And the reason this is useless is because normally when you get damaged enough that your limbs break, you're so low on health that you're going to use a stim anyway. So it doesn't really matter all that much, and it's only a 50% chance. So this armor passive is just not that good, and I hate that Arrowhead keeps putting just really bad armor passives on really cool looking armor, because there's a lot of armor in this game that I want to wear, but I never pick it because I just don't want to be at a disadvantage. If I'm going into like a Helldive 10 match or something, my friends and teammates are going to be upset with me if I'm picking a useless armor set and then I'm dying left and right just because I want to look cool. Now, sometimes I do just want to look cool and I'll lower the difficulty down, but I feel like I shouldn't have to choose between looking cool and having a useful armor ability. So I really hope that now that we got this change to the weapon attachments and we have weapon customization, I really hope that the next thing they overhaul is the armor system, and they'd let us choose what passives we want to put on our armor. Now, I know that they said that they didn't want to do that, but the armor system is just awful in this game. It's not very good. And this armor passive is just, there's so many better armor passives in this game. Do not buy this Warbond based on this armor passive. It is just a very bad armor passive. And like I said, when I tried to test out the armor, I couldn't even tell much of a difference, because anytime I got low on health where I would have broken a limb anyway, I'm just going to stim. Like anytime I get injured, I stim, because you can't take very much damage in Helldivers 2. If you're going into a fight and you're already low on health, you're going to die. Especially like against the Terminids or something where they can just double tap you. So you want to be at full health as much as possible. So this whole armor passive, it's almost as if they just couldn't think of a new one and they just slapped something together. That's what it feels like. So I think this is the worst thing out of the Warbond, is this passive. I think it's very disappointing. And that is going to do it for my thoughts on the Masters of Ceremony Warbond. It is my least favorite Warbond in all of Helldivers 2. If you're a new player, it might be worth getting for the booster. If you're on the fence about getting Warbonds and you're strapped for time or cash and you don't have that much super credits, I wouldn't be in a hurry to get this one. I'll put it that way. There are just way better Warbonds that you should get first before getting this one. If you're a late game player and you have an abundance of super credits and you just want to collect everything, then you know, sure, why not? The grenade's pretty decent and the armor looks cool. But outside of that, I would honestly pass on this Warbond. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, then consider giving me a thumbs up. It's greatly appreciated and it helps me out in the algorithm. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. That way you don't miss out on any future Helldivers 2 videos. And that is going to do it for me, and I will talk to you all next time.